Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited to be able to teach you how to draw black-eyed Susans today. For our supplies today, we're going to be using the Zebra mechanical pencil and the Zebra Sensations brush pen. This is a super fine tip. For our first step, we're going to draw a few gumdrops and circles for the center of our flowers. And I want this little black-eyed Susan bouquet to kind of overlap a little bit, which is why I'm drawing the centers first so that I can have that correct spacing that I'm looking for. And so for this first flower, I did a little gumdrop, and then for the second flower, because it's going to be kind of from that top view, I'm drawing a full circle because we will be able to see the complete center. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so that you guys can see a little bit better. I apologize if you couldn't see before. And we're going to do one more gumdrop, but as you guys can see, the top little portion of it is going to be a little bit thinner because this one is going to be a complete side view as opposed to a side view like this one. And so now I'm going to do this kind of, they almost look like skirts or ponchos or something. These are the edges of the petal, the guides for our petals. And so because this the very back one is going to be a side view, we're not going to have petals kind of going over the center, whereas with the one with the circles, we can see the petals going all the way around like the sunbeams. And then for this third one that I was just pointing to, it's a semi-side view, and so we're going to be able to see a few of the petals that are in the back, which is why I have kind of that V and then the complete circle on the bottom. I will be doing this next portion in pen so that you guys can see better. I know that pencil doesn't always come out in the video, but I definitely encourage you to use a pencil as you're drawing so that you guys can erase if you need to. So for our center, we're going to do a variety of tiny little squiggles. They can be C's, S's, U's, full circles, half circles, whatever you want. We just want to give it the illusion that it has, number one, texture, and number two, depth and darkness. So we want to make sure that we concentrate it enough because they're called black-eyed Susans for a reason. And so make it darker along the edges and along that line in the inner oval. And it's okay if you have a few white spaces. We're going to color this at the end just to make those white spaces brown. So just fill it up with random little squiggles. It doesn't have to be perfect. And so once you're done with the first one, we're going to do with the second one, and we're going to do the exact same thing, just slightly different because it's a circle, not a gumdrop. And we're also going to repeat the squiggles on this third center. I know that it looks kind of messy right now, but I want you guys to trust the process. It's going to look amazing when we're done, I promise. As I mentioned before, having those little squiggles is going to make it look like the center is textured. And if you look at a black-eyed Susan or pretty much any flower, the center is textured. It doesn't look smooth or anything like that. The petals sometimes do, but the centers definitely have that beautiful texture to them. Now it is time to start with our petals, and because I want them to be overlapped, I am going to choose this top left one to be the frontmost flower. And so this is going to be a semi-side view, and we're going to get started with what I like to call guide petals. So these are the petals that aren't overlapped. You can see the complete shape, and so I'm going to do kind of one in every direction, and then from there build the rest of them. And as you can see, these petals aren't perfectly straight along the edges. I'm adding plenty of curve because these petals are kind of folding out from the center and then kind of drooping down. I want to apologize for my hand getting in the way, but I promise I will move it eventually. But as I said, they are drooping down, and so as you can see, this petals, we're seeing that little corner as it's folding over. And so if you look at the perspective, the petals that are on the bottom portion of the screen are a lot longer, whereas these petals are in the back. They're shorter because of perspective and foreshortening. We can't see the full length of the petal because it's folding away from us, and so make sure that you don't make them all the same length. And it is okay to allow for a few gaps between the petals. They don't have to be completely uniform all the way around. Wildflowers sometimes have those gaps, especially if there's like wind or anything like that. And so now I'm going to do this back flower, and this one will have petals that are going behind this first flower and then in front of the bottom flower. And because this flower is from the side view, we're not going to have those petals kind of on the top portion of the center, just on the sides and downward. Now it is time to get started with our third flower, and this one, the petals are going to be kind of like a sun ray going all the way around the center because we are seeing it from the top view. So this flower is kind of leaning towards us. And so go around and do those guide petals, or the ones that are overlapped, and going around the circle. And then after that, you can start building the petals that are overlapped with the other ones. And so making sure that you add a lot of curve to these petals. We don't want them to look super perfect. You know, a daisy has very beautiful roundish petals, and these ones are kind of a little bit more wild, and I like that. And so make sure that you add some variety. We don't want it to look too uniform. I'm also adding a few folds just to add a little bit of variety, especially because the sunray petals kind of looks almost repetitive. And so to add a fold, all you have to do is add an extra line along the edge of the flower. Once you finish drawing the flowers, then we can get started with the stems. And black-eyed Susans usually have one main stem that will split into 2 or 3 different flowers, which is why I'm connecting the bottom 2 flowers into one stem. And then I'm gonna have the third flower have its own stem just for a little bit of variety, but still making sure to bring them kind of to the same point because this is a little bouquet. And so we would have this main point where we would kind of hold the flowers. And then from there, you can add just a few leaves to add some variation and interest, and there you have it. The next step will be details. I know that adding the detail lines can seem intimidating, but I definitely think that adding detail lines helps bring your flowers to life and helps bring it all together. And so I will be sharing a few of my top tips for adding detail lines in order to help you guys. I'm also planning on doing a full video on detail lines soon to give you guys a little bit more up close and personal look at them. But my biggest tip for adding detail lines is making sure that you add a variety in the length of your lines. A few of you share your work with me, and I love to see it, and I love seeing your improvement. And one place where we can all improve is making sure that we add the variety of length in our lines, because when they're all too uniform, it looks stagnant and flat. And so making sure that we add an extra long one, some shorter ones, will help make it seem more realistic. My second tip for adding detail lines is to make sure that you add curve to the lines. These detail lines aren't just random, they are showing the curve of your petals, as well as, you know, adding that depth in those places where you want a little bit more darkness, like the centers. And so if you're drawing from a reference photo, make sure that you're looking at where the petal is folding. If there's a natural vein in that petal, that will give you the best hint of where to put that detail line. But that curvature is what's bringing your flower to life because it's adding that movement. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, you guys should definitely be doing this part in pencil unless you guys feel very confident in where you're going to add the detail lines. And if you mess up, that's okay. Just erase your lines and start over. That is another big tip of mine, is to take your time. If you feel a little bit nervous about a certain step, you can always stop, come back a little bit later with fresh eyes, or you know, start over if you need to. But definitely take your time and just relax as you're adding the detail lines. Some of these lines will come natural to you, and other ones might feel a little bit awkward, and that's okay. You're working hard, and once you're done, here's your beautiful flower that looks amazing. And all you have to do is erase your lines, and then we can get ready to color. If you guys have made it this far in the video, then you guys should be so proud of yourselves. You guys have put in the work, and look at this beautiful drawing that you guys have created. As I move to this next step of coloring, there is this invisible step of where you guys pause and ink your drawing, or you can color it and then ink it over it. It's up to you depending on what you're doing. But like I said, there's an invisible step before you start coloring. But for my coloring, I am using the Zebra Mildliner brush pens, and I just use a nice light brown here in the centers. As you guys can see, it already darkens that center a lot more. You can also use a darker color to make it even more dark, but I just left it like this. And now I'm using 2 different yellows, kind of a little bit more fluorescent yellow as that base coat, and then I'm going to use that darker yellow to kind of go along where I have those detail lines and where I want it to be a little bit darker to add that depth and variety. What's really fun about this is that whatever paper you chose, you could have been drawing this on watercolor, and you can use watercolor, or if you're using normal paper, you can use markers, colored pencils, crayons, pretty much whatever you want. And I'm sure it's going to look beautiful, but just make sure that you're using the correct markers or paints for the paper that you're using. You don't want to use something that's too heavy on your paper that's going to cause it to fray or oversaturate or anything like that. I'm going to go ahead and speed up this portion just because all I'm doing is coloring the entire petal with this lighter yellow. And then the next step is going to be to use this darker yellow, and I'm not going to go over the whole petal. All I'm doing is almost like the detail lines, just adding a little bit of extra. So it's going to make it look a little bit darker, and I'm going to add more of this darker yellow on those petals that are underneath, just because then it looks like there's shadow as well. If you can't tell, this yellow is really making such a big difference. If you compare it to the leftmost flower, it definitely has a little bit more depth and shadow on those lower petals instead of making it look too uniform and flat. The next step is going to be to use a green for the stems, and I chose this lighter green as my base layer for my stems. I'm also going to use a darker green just to kind of create the same effect that I did with the two yellows on the petals. Just a little side note, whenever I use markers on leaves like this, I like to make sure that my strokes are going in the same direction as the leaf, in order to create kind of a natural looking details, because markers tend to leave those stroke lines, and if you were going the opposite direction it would look kind of funny. So make sure that you go with the direction of the leaf, and that way you're adding very subtle detail lines that look amazing. Now I'm going to use this slightly darker green only as kind of like adding detail. So I'm only adding a few lines, I'm adding a little bit more on those areas that I want slightly shadowed, and then not overdoing it on these leaves. And this is how I color my black-eyed Susans. I hope that this video has been informational for you and helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next Friday for another flower tutorial. Thank you, bye!